At a bank, a black man dressed simply walks in and requests a seven-figure transfer. The manager and staff treat him with contempt and even seize and lock his bank card. Customers are outraged and speak up. What they could never imagine is that he is actually the bank's CEO secretly checking on service, and when the truth comes out they will regret everything. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. The morning sun, usually a cheerful presence in Metro City's financial district, seemed to cast a harsh, almost clinical light on the polished marble floors of the Unity Financial branch on Commerce Street. At precisely 10 a.m., a man in a plain charcoal t-shirt and well-worn jeans stepped up to the counter. His movements were unhurried, his expression calm, almost serene. He held a standard identification card and a Unity Financial debit card in his hand. You wouldn't have known it from his unassuming attire, but this was David Thompson, the 48-year-old Chief Executive Officer of Unity Financial Group, the very corporation that owned this bank and hundreds like it. His personal net worth dwarfed the building he stood in, but today there were no bespoke suits, no Italian leather shoes, no retinue of bodyguards or assistants. He was just another face in the crowd. For several weeks, David's corporate office had been an unwilling repository of unsettling whispers. Anonymous messages, social media posts, and even a few formal letters had painted a disturbing picture of this particular branch. They spoke of subtle yet pervasive mistreatment, particularly aimed at minority customers. Allegations ranged from prolonged waiting times and unwarranted interrogations to outright accusations of fraud. David Thompson was a man of action, a leader who believed in direct observation over distant reports. He wanted to see the truth with his own eyes, feel the pulse of his institution unfiltered. And now, the truth in the form of thinly veiled contempt and dismissive glances was staring back at him. "I'm here to initiate a transfer," David stated, his voice even and low, as he slid his card across the cool glass counter. "A substantial seven-figure wire transfer from my primary Unity account." The usually bustling lobby seemed to hold its breath. Eleanor Vance, the branch manager, a woman in her early 50s with meticulously styled blonde hair, slowly arched an eyebrow. She didn't reach for the card. Instead, her gaze swept over David, a slow, deliberate assessment that lingered on his simple clothes. "A seven-figure transfer," she repeated, a slight smirk playing on her lips. Her tone wasn't one of professional inquiry, it was a blend of disbelief and something far colder. In that attire, David didn't flinch. He simply offered a brief nod. "Yes. From my Unity Financial account." Through the intercom speaker, loud enough for every customer in the silent lobby to hear, Mark Jensen, a 35-year-old teller, chimed in. "Sir, we'll need to re-verify your identity. We've had a rash of fraudsters attempting large transactions, often dressed in a way to blend in." Laughter, nervous and sharp, rippled from the back of the line. David's heart didn't pound, his voice didn't rise, but deep inside, a slow, controlled burn began to ignite. "My identification is valid," he stated, his voice still calm, "and so is my account." Mark didn't even bother to glance at his screen. "You'll need to provide proof of funds," he said, a smug inflection in his voice. "And perhaps a more convincing story." Eleanor crossed her arms, a gesture of finality. "Unless you're here to cause trouble, then you really should leave." The situation escalated quickly. Chloe Miller, another teller, younger and seemingly more aggressive, leaned forward. She snatched David's card from the counter and without a single check, slid it into a drawer beneath her station, locking it with a sharp click. "This card looks suspicious," she announced, her voice piercing the silence. "Frankly, it looks stolen. You need to leave, immediately." The pronouncement landed like a physical blow, not just to David, but to the collective consciousness of the customers witnessing the scene. A woman near the potted plants gasped audibly. A man whispered, "Did she just say that?" From the side of the room, a smartphone silently lifted. Brenda Hayes, a 29-year-old marketing consultant and regular customer, had been observing the exchange with growing unease. She pressed record. "This is blatant discrimination at Unity Financial," she stated, her voice clear and firm enough to be heard over the hushed murmurs. "And it's going online." She uploaded the clip to a popular social media platform. Behind her, Alex Kim, a 33-year-old local news reporter, joined in, pulling out his own phone. "Get his name," Brenda instructed Alex, her focus sharp. "We're documenting everything." Meanwhile, Sofia Rodriguez, a 25-year-old teller, stood frozen behind her station, her face a mask of disbelief. She had worked at the branch for 3 years, always under Eleanor's exacting management, but this was beyond anything she had witnessed. "He has every right to be here," Sofia said softly, her voice barely a whisper, but audible in the tense silence. Eleanor glared at her. "You are not paid to argue, Sofia." Sofia, though her voice trembled slightly, stepped forward anyway. "I am paid to follow policy, Eleanor. And you're breaking it." The room tensed, the air crackling with unspoken tension. Chloe sneered at Sofia. "You don't know who this guy is, Sofia. He's clearly trying to scam us." David slowly turned his head to look at Chloe, then at Eleanor, and finally back at the drawer where his card was now trapped. "You're damaging Unity Financial," he said, his voice quiet, almost mournful. "This isn't about me, it's about you." 25 years ago, David Thompson was a fresh-faced graduate, 23 years old, walking into a small community bank in his hometown. He wore jeans, a simple jacket, and carried an honest smile, but the teller saw only a young black man, seemingly out of place. He was trying to withdraw a down payment for his very first investment property, a small building he believed held the key to his future. They told him the funds were under review, that he needed to return with a suit and a lawyer before they would take him seriously. The sting of that dismissal, the humiliating assumption, had never left him. It had planted a seed, a burning desire to create a financial institution where no one would ever be treated with such prejudice, where potential was seen, not prejudged. And now, here he stood, in a bank he owned, facing the same insidious rot he thought he had eradicated. Back in the present, Eleanor pressed a button discreetly hidden under her desk, logging a silent note in the system: possible fraud. Escalate. She turned to Mark. "Call it in if he doesn't leave." Mark's voice, amplified by the intercom, reverberated through the lobby once more. "Final warning, sir. Leave now, or we escalate to law enforcement." David didn't move. Instead he pulled out his phone, not to record, but to dial. "Samantha," he said into the receiver when his assistant answered, "activate the internal monitoring system. Full audio and video capture." Samantha's calm, professional voice came through the phone. "It's live, David. We're monitoring everything. Just say the word." David paused. "Not yet." Sofia stepped forward again, positioning herself between Chloe and the drawer. "You locked his card without any justification," she asserted, her voice gaining strength. "You could lose your job for this, Chloe." Chloe rolled her eyes dismissively. "I'm not worried." Eleanor snapped. "Enough, Sofia. You're embarrassing yourself. Alex Kim caught that on video too." "She's defending the customer," he said, narrating into his phone, "and management is violating their own code of conduct." More customers began to murmur, their discomfort growing into indignation. One man spoke aloud. "Is this how you treat all men in casual clothes?" Eleanor responded without hesitation. "We treat suspicious behavior the same, no matter the attire." David's face remained outwardly calm, but his fingers curled imperceptibly into a fist. "You'll regret this, Eleanor," he said, his voice steady. "All of you will." Then came a small unexpected twist. Alex, in his journalistic instincts, leaned over and tugged at Chloe's drawer, which she had not fully secured. It opened just enough for him to see the name on the card before she slammed it shut again. "David Thompson," Alex announced, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "This card says David Thompson." A beat of silence. Then a sharp intake of breath from someone in the crowd. "Wait, that David Thompson." David stood a little taller then, a subtle shift in his posture. He still didn't reveal his full identity, not yet. But the atmosphere in the room had changed. The tension was no longer solely focused on him, it was turning slowly, like a heavy tide. Eleanor felt it. The silence following Alex's announcement of David Thompson's name didn't last long, but its impact was profound. Eleanor's eyes flickered, just for a second, a fleeting hint of doubt or perhaps even recognition, though she quickly masked it with a renewed layer of hostility. She turned sharply to Chloe. "Lock that drawer. Don't let anyone near that card again." Chloe, emboldened by the growing chaos, pressed her palm firmly on top of the drawer, as if guarding national secrets. "This card's suspicious," she snapped again, her eyes darting nervously toward Sofia. "And so is he. We asked him to leave, that's final." Her voice then rose sharp and cutting through the lobby. "You heard me, sir, leave now." The word sir was heavily laced with sarcasm. Mark didn't hesitate this time. He stepped from behind the counter, his hand gripping David's elbow tightly. "Let's not make this harder than it has to be," he muttered through clenched teeth. "This isn't a place for you to cause a scene. Time to go." Customers began to gasp, some stepping back, unsure if a physical confrontation was imminent. Others, however, moved forward, visibly offended by what they were witnessing. "He's a client," one man shouted, pulling out his phone. "You can't put your hands on him." But Mark, fueled by Eleanor's silent, unwavering nod, maintained his grip. "You don't belong here," Chloe muttered under her breath, just loud enough for David to hear. That was the final spark. "Let go of me," David said, his voice calm, but now carrying a thunderous authority. At the exact same moment, Sophia shoved her way between Mark and David. "You can't touch him," she cried, her voice cracking with emotion. "His account is valid. You haven't even looked at the screen." Mark's face contorted in anger, as if being challenged by a junior teller was an unbearable insult. "This isn't your decision, Sophia," Eleanor snapped. "He's a fraud. You'll find that out soon enough." Then came an explosion from the far side of the lobby. "This is an injustice," shouted Alex Kim, now live streaming to his news outlet's social media. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "They're physically removing a customer with no evidence. This is blatant discrimination on full display at Unity Financial." The live stream picked up gasps, overlapping voices, even the squeak of shoes as more customers stepped in to block Mark's path. Brenda added, her camera shaking with indignation, "The entire country is going to see this." A woman near the door muttered, her voice thick with emotion, "This is exactly what happened to my father last year." The temperature of the room had changed. The story was no longer confined to marble floors and glass partitions, it was bleeding into the world beyond through screens and cameras and shared outrage. David Thompson, at 15 years old, had walked into a small local branch with his grandmother's savings bond in hand. The teller, seeing his dark hair and youthful, slightly oversized hoodie, had asked if he was merely running an errand for someone. When he said no, that it was his grandmother's bond for his education, the teller called over a manager to verify. They never cashed the bond. His grandmother had to come in herself, even though her name and signature were clearly on the certificate. That particular humiliation had burned itself into his memory, the sting of being questioned, dismissed, invalidated, deemed untrustworthy, based purely on appearance. And now, all these years later, the same bitter flavor of doubt was being served to him, only this time, in a bank he owned. Back in the present, David didn't resist, but he didn't move either. "I came to transfer my money," he said. "You've now accused me of theft, taken my card, and put your hands on me. This will not go unanswered." Eleanor rolled her eyes. "Oh please, you're a threat, and we're following protocol." "Protocol?" Sophia snapped, her voice no longer trembling. "No, you're abusing power." Eleanor leaned toward her, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper meant only for Sophia. "I warned you once, Sophia. Keep this up, and you're next." Sophia blinked, stunned, then her expression hardened, like something inside her had cracked wide open. "I've seen you do this before," she said aloud, her voice now steady and resolute. "Last year, a customer of color asked to speak with a loan officer. You made him wait an hour, then denied him without even checking his file." That made Eleanor flinch, for the very first time. Her mouth didn't move. Brenda stepped closer with her camera. "Wait, you've had complaints before." Sophia nodded, and she buried them. Customers began murmuring louder. One older man said, "You people think you can do anything behind a title." Another woman added, "My mother's account was frozen here last month without cause," and then Alex, still streaming, spoke directly into his phone. "For anyone watching, this isn't an isolated case, this is systemic, and this branch is a problem." David, hearing that, turned slightly to face the room, not as a CEO, not yet, but as someone who had lived this experience too many times. "They think they're untouchable," he said. Not to Eleanor, but to the people watching, they believe appearance equals legitimacy. They've mistaken arrogance for authority. At that moment, Samantha's voice came through the phone in David's pocket, quiet but steady. "Internal system is live, David. We're capturing audio and customer testimony. You have full authorization to proceed. He didn't answer aloud, instead he looked at Chloe. Return my card. Chloe froze. Return it, he said again, his eyes now hard, no longer soft-spoken. You've made your point, you've crossed every line. She shook her head stubbornly. We're not done here. Brenda pointed a finger at her. You absolutely should be. You're being recorded right now. Alex added, the internet is watching. Thousands are tuning in, you're going viral. Eleanor looked momentarily panicked, then snapped, everyone put your phones away. But no one listened, instead the crowd grew bolder. One woman said, you owe him an apology. Another man asked, where's corporate? Eleanor barked, we are corporate. David smiled faintly. Not for long. Mark, still standing beside him, hesitated. This is going too far, he muttered to Eleanor. We can't keep pushing this. But Eleanor ignored him, raising her voice again. This man is not who he says he is. That was when the medium twist struck. Sophia stepped forward, trembling but undeniably brave, and pulled up the system on her side screen. I looked him up, she said, her voice loud and clear, resonating through the shocked silence. His account is real. And it's massive. He's not just a client, he's a top-tier executive account holder. Silence. Eleanor's mouth dropped slightly. Mark stared at the floor, his face paling. Chloe's face went white. Brenda let out a breathless, oh my God, and then David spoke again, still holding his phone in his hand. You're going to regret this, not because of who I am, but because of who you've chosen to be. Security code red. Eleanor barked, her voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. Yet, no security officer existed in that branch. It was a bluff, a final scare tactic to push David out. Remove him now, she screamed, her eyes locked on Mark. But Mark's hesitation was evident in the slump of his shoulders. Still he obeyed. He lunged forward again, and shoved David hard in the chest, forcing him back toward the glass doors. He's a fraud. Chloe shouted through the intercom speaker, her voice booming through the entire lobby like a public announcement. This man is impersonating a client. Do not assist him. Customers froze, horrified. One elderly woman stepped away from the teller line and clutched her purse. What is happening here? She whispered to no one. David stumbled backward. One step, then steadied himself. He didn't yell, he didn't lash out. He just raised his eyes toward the intercom speaker and exhaled slowly, as if steadying a volcano inside him. Don't do this. Sophia cried to Eleanor, stepping in front of David. You've gone too far. That announcement was slander, but Eleanor didn't care. Her voice had risen to a fever pitch. I run this branch, not some man off the street pretending he owns an account. We don't serve people like him. At that moment, the final fuse was lit. Brenda, visibly shaking with rage, shouted from behind her camera. That's enough. You just told the whole room he doesn't belong here. On what grounds? His skin, his clothes, his casual attire. Alex, still live streaming to his platform, panned his phone across the room. This is a banking hate crime happening live in Metro City. Share this. Save this. Customers in the background began to murmur again, angrily now. A young Latino man stepped forward and said, I've been treated the same way at this bank. This is no accident. The room grew tense with shared electricity. Eleanor, seeing the shift, tried to redirect the narrative. He's being aggressive, she snapped. Physically confrontational. But the customers weren't buying it anymore. No, you're confrontational, said a woman near the exit. You're shouting through a mic while a grown man stands there being humiliated. We see it. At 30, David Thompson had just closed a major funding deal, a pivotal moment for his burgeoning financial startup. He entered a prestigious bank to open a business line of credit, dressed impeccably, speaking confidently. Still, the bank manager asked him 3 times if he was truly authorized to use the account, despite his name being prominently displayed on every page of the corporate paperwork. I just need to verify you're not fronting for someone. The manager had said. That coded language, the subtle insinuation, had haunted him. It reminded David that no amount of success, no degree of accomplishment, would ever fully insulate him from the deep-seated assumptions lurking beneath the surface. That same doubt was echoing again now. This time, over loudspeakers, in his own bank. Back in the lobby, David's voice was no longer calm, it was firm. You've slandered my name. You've violated banking protocol. You've taken my card, refused service, and humiliated me in front of this entire lobby. Mark's grip loosened, he stepped back, uncertainty clouding his face. I just followed orders, he muttered. You put your hands on me. David replied, you physically pushed a client. Sophia stood beside him, trembling but fierce. I've submitted an internal ethics report, she told Eleanor. They'll get it today, and this time, someone will read it. Eleanor let out a bitter laugh. Your career's over the moment this ends, Sophia. You're siding with a scammer. Sophia turned to the crowd, her voice carrying conviction. He's not a scammer. He's a valued client. And even if he wasn't, you don't treat anyone like this. Brenda nodded fiercely. She's right, this is systemic abuse, and it stops today. Suddenly, a line formed, not at the teller counter, but between David and the exit. 5 customers, including Brenda and Alex, stepped forward and blocked Mark's path. One man crossed his arms. No one is dragging this man out of here, he declared. Another added, if he leaves, we all leave. A woman in heels pulled out her phone. I'm emailing the State Banking Commission. David stepped forward again, the crowd still forming a protective ring around him. You have one last chance, he said to Eleanor, his voice resonating with a quiet power. To walk this back, to apologize, to admit you were wrong. Eleanor crossed her arms defiantly. I'd rather be fired than apologize to someone who walked in here thinking he could manipulate us. David looked at her, then at Chloe, then Mark, then finally at Sophia. You're not the only ones being recorded, he said. You're being documented, logged, witnessed. He raised his phone slightly. And this branch is being reviewed at the highest level. Eleanor laughed again, a harsh, humorless sound. By who? Corporate's not watching this. And that's when the large twist hit. Brenda turned her camera directly on David and asked, her voice hushed. Sir, who are you? The room fell silent again. A heavy, expectant quiet. For a moment, David didn't answer. Then he simply said, you'll find out very soon. Sophia's eyes widened. She had suspected, but now it was undeniably clear. This man wasn't just another client. Eleanor squinted, her face a mask of confusion and irritation. What's your name? She demanded. David didn't flinch. You already heard it, he said, nodding toward Alex. You just didn't listen. And the crowd gasped again. Someone whispered, he's David Thompson. Another, the CEO. Brenda dropped her phone for a moment, an audible clatter. No way, that can't be. And then Alex, still holding his live stream, said aloud, his voice trembling with the enormity of the revelation, wait a minute. David Thompson, the owner of Unity Financial. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor's jaw went slack. Mark stepped back as if he'd just touched fire. Chloe staggered toward the drawer and fumbled for the key. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. This is a setup. Sophia exhaled sharply, tears rising in her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound vindication. Brenda turned her phone to the crowd and said, her voice full of emotion, you're watching the moment a bank branch tried to expel its owner for looking like he didn't belong. David looked around the room, not with arrogance, but with something deeper, a kind of profound grief. This wasn't supposed to happen again, he said softly. Not here, not in my bank. The air inside the Unity Financial lobby had turned electric, dense, volatile, moments from combustion. Eleanor's confidence was cracking, but she wasn't entirely done. This is an impersonation scheme, she yelled, desperate now, her voice thin and frantic. He's not who he says he is. Do not listen to this man. She turned to Mark with a jerking nod. Push him out now. Mark didn't move. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But Eleanor barked again, louder this time. Move him. And Mark obeyed, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists, and he lunged forward harder than before, slamming his forearm into David's chest and driving him back toward the entrance. The room gasped, a ripple of voices surged in protest. Chairs screeched, phones lifted. Hey, get your hands off him. Someone shouted from near the front desk, but the damage was already done. David stumbled back, colliding with the heavy glass door, his breath catching in his throat. Sophia ran forward instantly, shielding him, her hands outstretched. "Stop it," she cried, her voice cracking but carrying. "He's your CEO." For a split second the entire room froze. Mark's hand dropped. Chloe stood still, frozen in disbelief. Eleanor's lips parted. What did you say?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sophia turned slowly to face her boss. "You heard me. That's David Thompson, the owner of Unity Financial. The man whose card you locked away like stolen property. The man you tried to shove out of his own branch." Brenda's camera was trembling now, not from her hands, but from the sheer energy surging through the room. Alex muttered, "Oh my God," into the live stream. "It's real, she just said it." She confirmed it, and the lobby erupted. Customers began shouting, not in confusion anymore, but in rage. "He's the CEO. You tried to assault your own CEO," one man yelled. "You need to be arrested," said another. A young woman in a green blazer stepped between David and Mark and held up her phone like a shield. "You're not touching him again." Two more customers flanked her. A line was forming, not just symbolic but physical, a barrier of ordinary people, angry and ashamed to have witnessed what they just had. Eleanor tried to reclaim authority. "Everyone calm down. You're disrupting operations." But she couldn't finish because a voice cut through the lobby, Samantha's voice, still on the open call with David. "David," she said, "we've activated the incident log. Everything is being recorded, time-stamped and preserved. We have the footage. You have full board authorization to proceed." David didn't move, not yet. He looked around the room, at the customers, at Sophia, at the faces staring back at him not with pity but with a fierce fire. This was no longer just about him. This was a reckoning. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped away from the door, toward Eleanor. "You pushed me once," he said softly, "then twice. You had every chance to de-escalate, and instead you doubled down. You used that speaker to humiliate me. You ignored protocol, you weaponized prejudice, and now, you're going to face the consequences." Eleanor looked like she'd been struck. "You're bluffing," she stammered. "You wouldn't come in here dressed like that. You wouldn't pretend." David's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't pretend, I came as a customer. I came because I wanted to believe this branch had changed. But it hasn't. You're still who you've always been, just bolder now because you thought you were safe." He turned to Mark, who had taken several slow steps back toward the teller line. "You shoved me twice. You escalated without checking a single fact." Mark's lips parted, but no sound came out. He looked at Chloe for support. She turned away. "This is serious," she mumbled, staring at the floor. "We didn't know." David turned to the crowd. "That's always the excuse, isn't it? We didn't know. We didn't know that I was a CEO, that I was wealthy, that I had the right to be here." His voice rose, not with anger but with gravity. "But the truth is you didn't care. Because what you thought you saw was a man who didn't belong." Brenda said aloud, her voice filled with emotion, "That's the part that hurts the most." Alex added, "He shouldn't have to be a CEO to be treated like a person." Eleanor was sweating now. "You can't fire us," she snapped, though her voice had lost all its venom. "You have to go through process, protocol." David pulled out his phone and dialed again. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "I need you on the line." Seconds later, a second voice joined. "Mr. Thompson, a senior board member at Unity Financial Group." "David," he said, "we're monitoring the feed. You're clear to act. The board has voted to support full executive authority under your discretion." Eleanor blinked rapidly. "What does that mean?" David didn't answer her directly. He stepped beside Sophia and looked her in the eye. "You've been brave today, Sophia, and principled. You're the kind of leader this bank needs." Then turning to Samantha over the phone, he said, "Begin processing staff terminations for Unity Financial, Metro City Branch. Eleanor Vance, Mark Jensen, Chloe Miller, effective immediately." Samantha's voice was calm but firm. "Confirmed. Processing now. Digital access revoked. HR has been alerted." Gasps swept through the room. Chloe actually staggered back against the counter. "You can't do this," she cried. "This is insane." Sophia stepped forward. "No, it's justice." And then came the very large twist. Mark, pale and shaking, looked directly at David. "There's something you need to know," he said. "Eleanor told us not to serve certain customers. She had a list. She said to delay service for anyone who looked off." The room fell silent again. Eleanor's face went white. "That's a lie," she shouted. "He's trying to save himself." But Mark shook his head. "It's not. It's all true. She said the bank didn't need those kinds of accounts. She said if they got upset, just stall, then call escalation." Brenda gasped. "You had a playbook for discrimination." Alex's voice trembled. "This is bigger than just one day." David stepped forward slowly. "Thank you, Mark," he said, his voice icy. "You still lose your job, but your honesty might keep you out of court." Eleanor screamed, "This isn't fair. You can't believe him," but the crowd already had. A woman near the door shouted, "We knew this place was toxic." Another man added, "He's exposing it in real time. We're watching justice happen." Samantha's voice returned. "Media has picked up Brenda's video. It's spreading fast." And David, standing in the center of that lobby, didn't look smug. He looked tired, but resolute. "This isn't about revenge," he said to everyone listening. "This is about integrity. No one should be treated the way I was treated today. Not me, not anyone. And starting now, Unity Financial is changing." Customers broke into applause, not thunderous, but steady, respectful, earned. David turned to the remaining tellers. "If you've been silent until now, that silence won't protect you much longer. Make your choice." And with that, the tide fully turned. The branch wasn't a bank anymore. It had become a courtroom. The jury was the public. The sentence had already begun. Eleanor Vance was still stammering denials when David stepped fully into the center of the lobby. His plain charcoal t-shirt now seemed like the sharpest suit in the room. There was no podium, no microphone, yet his voice cut through the glass and marble like a court ruling. "I am David Thompson," he said, calm and unmistakable, "Chief Executive Officer of Unity Financial Group, 35% shareholder, owner of this building, this branch, and the chair you're standing behind, Eleanor." The silence was total. Even the clack of a pen dropping at teller station 3 rang like thunder. Customers stood motionless. Chloe froze like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Mark's jaw dropped. Eleanor's face turned ashen, but she still tried to speak. "This is not possible. You tricked us. You came in." David raised a hand, not to silence her, but to spare the lobby from another second of her excuses. "I came in the same way every customer comes in," he said, "unarmed, unescorted, dressed in ordinary clothes, hoping to be treated with the same basic dignity you'd give a stranger. What I got was suspicion, contempt, and then violence. And I want every person in this building to remember that, because it ends now." His phone remained in his hand, still connected to Samantha, still recording. "Samantha," he said evenly, "you may now proceed." Her voice, cool and exact, echoed back through the speaker. "Eleanor Vance, branch manager. Mark Jensen, teller. Chloe Miller, teller. Your terminations are being processed, effective immediately, under CEO Emergency Authority, Section 9. See digital credentials deactivated. HR notified, regional security notified." Eleanor lurched forward as if to protest, but her monitor blinked black behind her, her access revoked in real time. "This is illegal," she cried. "You didn't give notice. There's no investigation." David turned to her. "You ran the investigation yourself the moment you chose to profile me. You conducted the trial when you humiliated me over a speaker. And you executed the sentence when you tried to physically eject me from a bank I own. You just didn't know I was watching." Mark didn't say a word. He lowered his head, hands clasped like a child about to be punished. Chloe, still guarding the drawer that held David's confiscated card, unlocked it with shaking fingers, and placed the card on the counter. She didn't speak, she didn't apologize, her silence was soaked in guilt, but David didn't look at her. His eyes had moved to Sophia, who was standing still, tears just beginning to pool at the edges of her eyes. "Sophia Rodriguez," David said, "you're being promoted, effective immediately. Corporate services will follow up. Your courage, your humanity, didn't go unnoticed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Brenda mouthed, "Yes," and Alex caught it all on camera. Sophia blinked, stunned, "Sir, I didn't do it for recognition," she whispered. "I did it because it was right." David gave the smallest nod. "That's exactly why you're being recognized." He turned back to the lobby at large, his voice rising not in volume but in weight. "Let this serve as a line in the sand. Unity Financial is undergoing reform, starting today. Any employee caught ignoring bias complaints, engaging in microaggressions, withholding service based on appearance, or covering for others who do, will be removed. No suspensions, no retraining seminars. Removed. If you cannot see all customers as equals, then you do not belong here." The tension in the air didn't break, it shifted. What had been outrage was now awe. David wasn't angry anymore, he was rebuilding, in real time. Eleanor, desperate, still tried to salvage her footing. "This is a disaster, you'll lose half your staff." David turned to her, his eyes sharp. "I'd rather lose staff than lose our soul." And then came the huge twist. Mark took a step forward. He was still trembling, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from a strange sense of release. "Mr. Thompson," he began, not daring to meet David's eyes. "I need to say something, on the record." The room hushed again. David gave a nod. "Speak." Mark cleared his throat, and for the first time since the morning began, his voice sounded human. "Eleanor instructed us to delay service for certain customers. She didn't call it profiling, but we knew. She'd say things like, make them wait, see if they're serious. If they don't dress right, they don't bank right. And she told us to tag accounts for review if they looked suspicious, which meant anyone who didn't look like the investors she was used to seeing." Eleanor gasped. "You coward," she screamed. "You agreed with me, you said the same things." Mark nodded. "And I regret every one of them, but I'm not letting you lie anymore. You made it policy." David didn't react immediately. He let the silence absorb Mark's confession. A few customers whispered to each other. One woman muttered, "This explains everything I went through here last month." Another nodded, "They lost my check for 3 days." David spoke slowly. "Thank you, Mark. Your confession doesn't erase what you did, but it reveals what was hidden. That's something." Mark's eyes dropped. Eleanor looked like she might scream, or cry, or collapse. She settled for none of the above. She simply turned and walked toward the back door, only to find it locked, access revoked. Chloe stood there too, ashen, saying nothing. The door wouldn't open for any of them anymore. They weren't part of Unity Financial, not anymore. Then Samantha's voice returned. "David, update from PR. Brenda's video has reached 200,000 views in under 20 minutes. It's been picked up by Metro City Daily, Citizens for Consumer Rights, and a financial equity watchdog group. We're in the headlines." David nodded. "Let them watch. Let them see what accountability looks like." He turned to the lobby, to the stunned customers, to the tellers still at their stations, hands off their keyboards. "This isn't just a message to Unity Financial. This is a message to every institution that thinks silence protects power, that shaming someone in public, based on skin, clothing, or zip code, is just standard procedure. Those days are over." He walked to the counter, picked up his card, and placed it into his wallet. He didn't demand service. He didn't reclaim the 7-figure sum. He didn't need to. His presence had already transformed the space, not through rage, but through reform. "We will rebuild from here," he said, "but not with the same foundation." That foundation just cracked wide open. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Chloe Miller is banned from any future rehire at Unity Financial or any of its partners. Her file will reflect this incident in full." Chloe looked like she'd been slapped. "You can't do that," she whispered. David met her eyes. "I just did." And in that moment, the balance of power in the room shifted for good. The applause that had erupted after David fired the branch staff faded into a heavy, expectant hush, like the moment before a verdict is read. No one moved. David remained standing in the center of the lobby, his tone now even, deliberate, measured. "Effective immediately," he said. "This branch is under operational lockdown. No further transactions will be processed today. All appointments canceled. The only business being conducted here right now is justice." Behind him, Samantha's voice echoed through his phone again. Operations paused. access to internal systems, limited to CEO and designated personnel. Reform template deployed to Unity Financial, Metro City branch. Then came Mr. Thompson, the board member, chiming in on the second line. David, media is now reporting live. I've authorized the PR response. You're cleared to proceed with structural reform. David didn't look rattled. In fact, he looked calmer than he had all morning. This isn't about punishing a few people, he said, turning slowly to face the stunned tellers still at their stations. This is about restoring integrity. We cannot afford to leave this culture intact, not even in the corners. He turned to Sophia. You'll be working with corporate compliance directly starting today. I want a full review of every discrimination complaint logged here since 2020. No file stays buried. Sophia nodded, stunned, but steady. I'll handle it. Customers broke into murmurs of approval, some filming again, others whispering their support. But the moment of resolution was short-lived, because what came next ripped open something far deeper. As David approached the teller line, Chloe gone, Eleanor locked out, Mark silent, one of the remaining employees, a teller no older than 23, raised a hesitant hand. Sir, I think you should know something. David turned to him. Speak freely. The young man glanced nervously around the room, then back to David. Last fall, Eleanor had a policy she called selective screening. It wasn't on paper, but she told us verbally that certain clients should be treated with extra scrutiny. She never said it directly, but we all understood who she meant. The room stilled again. Alex lowered his phone just slightly, his eyes widening. David said nothing, only waited. The teller continued. There were at least 3 written complaints from customers who said they felt racially profiled. One was a black business owner who came in to deposit revenue. The other 2 were Latino and Filipino clients. Eleanor told us to delay their transactions, then later told Mark to remove their names from the follow-up queue. David's stare shifted sharply toward Mark. Is that true? Mark hesitated, but the moment had passed for hesitation. It is, he admitted quietly. We didn't log the complaints, we shredded them. Several customers gasped. You destroyed formal complaints of discrimination. Brenda's voice was still steady, but cold now, steel wrapped in silk. On whose order? Mark swallowed hard. Eleanor's. Always Eleanor's. Brenda muttered. This wasn't just bias, this was a cover-up. Alex nodded. This is a civil rights violation in a suit and tie. David stood straighter. Samantha, he said. I want every branch's complaint logs for the last 24 months cross-referenced with staffing records and executive overrides. If there's a pattern, find it. Samantha's answer was immediate, already in motion. Compliance is escalating it. The weight of the moment settled over the room again, but this time it wasn't just the people inside the bank who were listening. The phones in customers' hands were streaming, posting, sharing everything. Not for clout, but for truth, for exposure, for justice. David looked around and saw it in their faces, black, white, brown, young, elderly, each of them seeing a piece of themselves in what had just happened, and he wasn't finished. This was never just about a 7-figure transfer, he said softly. It was about something far more valuable, accountability, decency, fairness. He turned to Mr. Thompson over the phone. We're not just firing people anymore. We're restructuring from the inside. New training, new accountability teams, an internal whistleblower fund, and every complaint, every last one, will be seen. Mr. Thompson replied without pause. You have full board backing, David. The message is clear. Bias isn't just bad optics, it's bad banking. David nodded once. Then let's build a new foundation. 3 days after the incident, at Unity Financial's Metro City branch, Brenda's video had passed 9 million views. Every major outlet had run it, headlines using phrases like CEO profiled in his own bank, and justice in real time. But David Thompson didn't do a single interview. He didn't sit for a morning show. He didn't post a statement on social media. He went back to work, quietly, strategically, and by the end of the week, 5 more Unity Financial branches had entered internal review for complaint suppression. Over 24 employees had been removed, not as scapegoats, but as part of a methodical, evidence-based house cleaning. David never raised his voice, he never called it a purge, he called it realignment. And in that realignment, Sofia Rodriguez became more than a promoted teller. She became the face of Unity Financial's newly formed Equity Integrity Team, a rotating group of frontline employees empowered to review, report, and correct bias incidents from the inside out. She stood up. David had said simply at the press conference he finally gave 2 weeks later, when standing up came with risk. That's the culture we're building. But not everyone applauded. There were protests, some calling the firings hasty, others saying David was weaponizing prejudice, but the facts were solid, the patterns undeniable, the stories real. David let the new policies speak for themselves, and in doing so he created not just a headline, but a blueprint for institutional self-correction. And yet, beneath the reforms, beneath the headlines, beneath the applause and backlash, something deeper remained unresolved until the final twist emerged. It came not from Mark, not from Chloe, not even from Eleanor. It came from an anonymous tip, sent to Samantha's office 3 weeks later, a former regional manager, now retired, who admitted that Eleanor's pattern of discrimination had been known for years, but never acted on. Why? Because as the tipster wrote, she kept minority accounts low risk. They didn't ask for loans, they deposited, they rarely challenged her decisions. She kept the branch numbers stable by managing out high-contact clients. No one wanted to rock the boat. The revelation sent a deeper chill through David's office than anything that had happened in that lobby. It wasn't just one bad manager, it was a tolerated system. A quiet, complicit culture where discrimination wasn't shouted, it was baked in. Denials made with smiles, bias hidden beneath spreadsheets. David closed his office door and read the email twice. Then he called Samantha. "We're going national," he said. "Not just internal reform. We're launching the Diversity Access Index. I want every Unity Financial branch scored, not by profit, but by trust." Samantha paused on the line. "That changes everything," she said. "Exactly," David replied. 3 months later, that change became visible, quietly but powerfully. Branches began holding community listening sessions, all teller training was overhauled, equity officers were assigned to every region. A new scholarship fund, quietly backed by David himself, began offering grants to first-generation finance students from underserved neighborhoods. And at the heart of it all, David remained, still focused, not the viral CEO, just a man cleaning his house, starting with the lobby floor he had once been shoved across in front of strangers. And what about that branch on Commerce Street? It didn't close, it transformed. New faces, new leadership. A wall of customer testimonials filled the space where the teller line had once stood, and at its center, under soft lighting, a plaque read, "This branch changed not because it had to, but because one man reminded us all that silence has a cost."